Ladies and gentlemen, House Bill 416 is a pretty straightforward bill. We've talked a lot about DOGE and accountability this year. This bill is all about accountability. It simply states that when we allocate money to education for certain things, whether it's facilities or math and science or reading, that those monies are spent on those items and nothing else. And if they are spent on something else, that they either have to pay the money back or JFAC will have the accountability and the teeth to pull that money out of their budget. Right now we have multiple schools, and including the State Department of Education itself, failing audits, and nothing's being done about it. So when they fail these audits, this simply says JFAC can go in and pull that money. So it doesn't get much simpler than this. This is what we're all here to do, is to make sure that our taxpayers' money is being spent responsibly and actually getting to the students or the projects we think it should be going to as a body. And with that, I ask for your green light.
Thank you, gentlemen. For the motions, for the debate on the motion. Lane 32.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the good gentleman from District 7, for bringing this bill. This is a problem we've been trying to get at for many, many years. When we set a budget and we say you are legally being given money for X, we expect you to spend it on X. We have been putting language in appropriation bills starting 3 years ago around accountability. This year we have clear language, we're calling it. It means this appropriation, if you read an appropriation bill, you'll find that language. It says this appropriation is subject to certain conditions, limitations, and restrictions. Public schools has been a tough nut to crack, and I can tell you some stories over the past of why they think they should not have to spend it for the reasons we sent it. It is time, especially if we're going to convert to a new funding formula next year, that we have some transparency on where the funds actually are being spent, so that when we do create a new funding formula, we'll be doing it on the basis of evidence, knowing where the money exactly is being spent, which general ledger code is being attributed to that. We thought we would get at it with Transparent Idaho. It was an important step forward. This bill is really important to helping us advance to a more transparent, student-based funding formula next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For debate on the motion. Lane 6.
Would the good gentleman from 7 stand for a
Gentleman
question?
yield to a question from the lady from 6.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. There are other agencies that we get audits on that have failed. So do we have this same language somewhere in code that calls out every other agency, or are we only calling out the education?
Gentleman 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not know. I'm planning on working towards that direction of eventually bringing all other state agencies into the same account, because this is a step we should be doing. Right now we have a spending issue within departments where money is not being properly used, and I think everybody across the state should be falling into this category. So,
okay.
Just
6. A quick follow-up, Mr. Speaker.
Yield to additional question.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good gentleman.
Gentleman,
Do you have an example of where the State Department of Education or our teachers are not reporting? Because I know there's reporting in place for them to report where they're spending. So I'm kind of confused why we're just calling them out.
Gentleman 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there is testimony that's been brought in committee on how money has been misused, whether it was money that schools received for a facility and then they didn't need all that money, so they took whatever was left over and used it for building sidewalks. When we allocate money for facilities, we expect that money to be used on facilities, and if a school gets more than they need and they spend it on something else, you've just shorted another school the opportunity to get some of that facilities funds. So we're trying to just keep everything where it's supposed to be, so it's not being spent on something it's not supposed to be.
Thank you, good gentleman.
Lane 6. For debate on the motion. Gentleman 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman for 7 yield to a question?
Gentleman yield to a question.
I will cautiously yield, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having administered hundreds of millions of dollars of grant money or state money, it's typical in a given big budget like this one would be that they're allowed to move within 10% in categories, because when it's really difficult to stick to an exact dollar amount every time. And so I was just curious if there's any leeway in that percentage-wise, or are you saying that this is exactly what they're allocated, that's all they get?
Gentleman 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is it's exact. If we give money, like they already do this, there's already an audit system in place, and there's certain things that we allocate to them that they have to line item audit. Technology, for example, with computers and things like that. So if we're giving them the money for that, and then they take 10% of that, and they're like, we don't need it here, we're going to spend it somewhere else. That's what this bill is going to do, is going to stop that, because that money could go to another school that needs it for technology. The whole point is to stop people from taking money that could go to another school and using it for something that it wasn't intended for.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I debate the bill for a sec?
Gentleman 33 has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. And I'm 100% behind accountability. I love the concept of this bill. I just think that if you're gonna restrict an agency of that nature, you do have to have some leeway, because when you work on those budgets, if any of you in this room have ever done that on a multi-million-dollar, it's never going to be exact. It's not. It's very difficult. Everybody tries really hard to stay exact on those, but there's times when you have to move like your personnel a little bit, and that's why there's a lot of leeway and multiple grants up to around 10% is the typical standard that we would see. In most agencies never even do that high, but it could be 4 or 5%. You move within categories, and there's about 8 to 9 categories you use. And if you look at the big book of codes, there's hundreds of codes they use for every single expenditure, and it's really difficult to stay exact to the exact line item that you've been given in there. I understand what you're trying to do, and I applaud that. Just debating on that case, just for those that work in this field.
For the debate on the motion, good lady 34.
Will the good gentleman yield to a question?
Gentleman 7 yield. You're pretty popular today. Gentleman yields.
Gentlemen, yield.
Mr. Speaker and good gentleman, you make reference to funds being reimbursed to the state. What is the trigger mechanism by which funds must be reimbursed? I don't see anything about audits. I don't see any language. What's the catalyst?
Gentleman 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it clearly states in the legislation that if they don't return those funds, that JFAC can pull it out of their budget.
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker, could I try again?
One more try. Gentleman for 7 yield. One more try.
I guess so.
Mr. Speaker and good
Don't
gentlemen,
have to. Good gentleman. Lady 34.
I am referring to what is the notice and or official moment in the process at which a school district is notified that it has colored outside the lines and must return funds? Is it an audit finding? What precisely is the trigger by which a school district must then reimburse said funds?
Gentleman 7.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is that this will happen during the audit process that already exists. So when the audit system happens and the auditors come through and they find that they're non-compliant in a certain section, that's where this would trigger in, and they would be instructed to reimburse or have that money removed from their budget.
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
I would join the good gentleman from 33 in the intent of what this legislation is trying to do, but it's effectively left out one of the most critical components. When? So you may have an audit that's accounted for within the system, but where in this legislation does it say that the audit itself becomes the mechanism by which the reimbursement is measured? Where in the legislation does it establish that the appeals process could potentially be in place for said audit? It just says explicitly, reimburse. That's it. Now, I will grant you, if our school districts aren't following the law and aren't doing what they're supposed to do with the funds provided to them by the state, they need to be held accountable. But I'd really like to think we're actually providing with clear direction on what it is we want them to do and what the expectations are that we're setting. In this instance, this legislation doesn't get to that point of providing clarity for the districts and is going to result in a back and forth discussion between the department and the individual districts, increasing the administrative costs and burdens. If we want accountability, let's actually pursue accountability, but do so in a way that's effective. I urge your red light.
Gentleman 26.
Mr. Speaker, for debate against, please.
Gentleman has the floor.
From a little different view of this and a little bit higher level issue is I don't see the benefit of trying to micromanage local school boards. They're elected by the by the people of their community to manage their school districts. To me, it's a bit disrespectful to think as the legislature we know better than any locally elected school board. If you look at which direction we're going and why, the state of Idaho has been comfortable handing out $5,000 tax credit checks with, for my view, absolutely no strings attached to them. And now out the other side of our mouth, we want to micromanage every single dollar that happens. I agree with my colleague behind me that when you're talking these kinds of money, doing bids, paying for projects, there's no way to get everything to come out exactly. It's a great attempt, but to me it's in totally the wrong direction.
For debate, gentleman from 21,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
on that floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to address some concerns that brought up, particularly from the gentleman from 33. As the gentleman from 7 talked about, if the trigger really is an audit, audits have a concept called materiality. And in the spirit of the good gentleman from 7 who likes to confess all his sins on the floor, once upon a time I was an auditor, so I understand this concept. It doesn't have to be exactly to every penny and every dollar in the audit. There's a level of threshold where it's immaterial, where it doesn't have to be exactly there. And so if this is dependent on an audit, then it's going to be a material difference, meaning a substantial difference in how the funds were meant to be spent. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd urge your green light.
For debate on the motion, Lave 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. I really am supporting accountability, and we've all been talking about accountability. And I think that this bill should be a bill that is relating to all agencies, not just one agency. And the good lady from 34 points out that there are no words, and we have said this multiple times on this floor that words matter. And without knowing for this particular department what is going to trigger and an audit happens automatically, but what if something is being seen earlier? Can they jump in, I guess, and take care of it? But there's just nothing in here that states what we do and what we don't do. So if an audit, and we get those copies, we all get audits and copies of them, and there are multiple agencies that have deficiencies in their audits. So I think that this should go back, we should rework it so that we include all agencies, that every single one of our agencies should be held to the same standard, and then discuss in here what happens and what mechanism can they appeal that to the auditors if they don't believe that they are mistaken. If they just put a wrong code. I mean, we need to know what can and can't be done in this regard. So for that reason, and that reason only, I am a red light. And so I really encourage you to put your red light on, and let's go back to the drawing board and bring a bill that affects everybody. Thank you.
For debate on the motion, gentleman from 1.
Mr. Speaker, to debate the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
So, in the county budgeting handbook, it's actually illegal for counties to send money from one fund to another, other than where it's statutorily authorized. So the counties have been doing this for a long time. I remember when I was a county commissioner, we had to prepare a resolution to declare if we were going to move money from one budget to the other. And at the end of the year, I realize the state budget is bigger, but it's always been my contention that if you can manage a household budget, basically what a county and a state budget is a whole bunch of those budgets added together. And at the end of the county year, we were managed down to the penny. I don't think that's impossible in this day and age of multiple access to computerized programs to do this. It was done with handwritten ledgers for many, many years. So I think this is a good bill. It's a good start. I'm sure the good man from 7 has other plans for adding agencies in, but I think this is a good start, and it will give us a template to work with. I urge your green light.
For debate on the motion, Hearing none. Oh, we got a bunch. Good lady from 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Lady has the floor.
I really appreciate what both the good lady from 32 and the good gentleman from 7 are trying to do. I just want to continue on to what the good lady from 34 said. The issue with this is it's a cart before the horse. In education, spending is so nuanced, and right now, we just do not have a QuickBooks-style accounting system that would allow for each one of these individualized things to happen. That I do agree, we want to have transparency, but we're about to get a lot more nuanced, I think, in our education spending, and to demand accountability when those specifics do not currently exist is going to put a lot of strain on the state and on our school districts. It was testified in committee that this would cost a lot of money in new staffing at the state level for this new auditing system, and then massive staffing at the district level to train, to update, to try and itemize every single thing to make sure that it's accountable. This is a cart before the horse bill. Let's get our funding formula. Let's find out what the world is going to look like in a year, and then we can start talking about assuring accountability in any agency, including education.
For the debate on the motion, gentleman from 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Has the floor.
Earlier, gentleman across the way from me was talking about allowing the school districts and the school boards that are elected by the people to make the decisions about how their money is spent. I argue that because we as a legislature represent all the people of the state of Idaho, and we are taking money from their pockets to send it to school districts across the state to be used for a specific purpose. We have to guard that money. We have to protect that money. We need to make sure that the money is being spent for the things that the legislature has determined is important. So I fully support this bill. I think it's time to get accountability. Having been a member of a school board before, I know how money is shifted around, meant for a certain purpose, used for other things. We need to clean this up. Thank you.
Debate on the motion, gentleman 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate.
Gentleman has the floor.
Having been in committee when this came through the committee, I'd like to clear up a couple things. When the good gentleman brought this forward, there were people who implied that this would cost more money, take more people to do. That was never the implication, and that is not what the good gentleman from 7 delivered to us. What he delivered is that we have an existing auditing program going on for the different agencies, and right now we're dealing with education. And those agency auditing that occurs when there is found to be problems, that would be the trigger. It already exists. What I'm amazed by today is we're here at a body that continually talks about transparency and keeping control of the people's money. We bring forward something that might make that step, and now I'm hearing that, well, I really enjoy this, but I really like this, but I would contend that if the good lady from 6 would like this to be spread to other departments, that she can work on a bill to do that, as well as anybody else on this floor. Right now, we are dealing with one, and that's called education. And many, many times in the Education Committee, we hear about a lack of funds. And then we learn that funds might have went over here, or we created this and funds went over there. What this bill intends to do is make sure that funds that are allocated for an area in education actually wind up in the area. I'm amazed that this seems to be complex. The other thing I see here is that, well, there's not 6 pages of explanation. No, there is no confusion. It's very direct, it's very short, it's very concise. I think it's very clear that it needs a green light. Thank you very much.
For the debate on the motion, lady from 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, friends, that's fine. I've got you covered.
Debate the bill.
Thank you. I'll try not to repeat everything that's been said, but just a couple of thoughts. First, this is kind of my version, actually, of Doge. It's getting and digging down and finding out where we have the inefficiencies. Now, remember this: some of us serve, all of us serve on different committees. I happen to have been on education, and still am. I would absolutely not support a bill that came and tried to include all the other agencies. Do you know how big that bill would be? It would fail. You would tell us to take it back. It's far better to focus on one at a time. Now let me tell you something that should probably hit each one of you as it does me at home all the time. We gave the teachers a raise session or two ago, and we worked hard to give the teachers a raise. And then at my debates, guess what the teachers say? We didn't get a raise. Well, you should have gotten a raise. We gave you the money to get a raise. Well, we didn't get that raise. Or I got a little bit of a raise, but it wasn't the full amount of the raise. Why didn't they get the raise? Because they didn't have to spend the money as we directed them to get the raise. So now we're on the hook again because we don't support our teachers with the raise. When I give money and vote to give money for a raise, by gosh, I expect all that money to go to the teachers for a raise. That's what we're dealing with. Give this the green light.
Further debate, gentleman 25.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the lady from 32 a question, if I may.
Lady 32 yields a question.
Yeah.
The lady yields.
Yeah, good lady. You just heard the testimony about the teacher salaries, and I'm wondering if you could explain better when we said we were going to give $6,400 for every teacher, why every teacher didn't get $6,400.
Lady 32.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman from 25?
25.
25? Yes? I would be delighted to explain that because it gives me an opportunity to make another pitch for a new funding formula next year. When we distributed that money, I believe it was $63.59 per teacher that was supposed to go out. We did so on the basis of the funding formula, the number of FTPs that are funded by the state under the current funding formula. You have a lot of districts who have very high supplemental levies. I won't name names, but I think you can think of who those are. They are able to hire a lot more teachers and a lot more staff because one of those districts doesn't even have to run a levy, a voter-approved levy, to get those funds. Most other districts do. So we sent money out according to the funding formula and all the teachers that pays for. If a district hires teachers beyond that, they're expected and must use local or federal funds to pay for those. We expected them at the time to use local and federal funds to pay that same amount to those teachers that they hire behind the state. That didn't happen. That is what explains why some teachers got significantly less than $6,000 for their raise that year.
Gentleman 25.
Thank you, good lady. I'd like to debate.
Gentleman has the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In committee, I voted no on this bill because of this similar question that was brought up, because a lot of it was brought up about teacher salaries, and I believe that our funding formula, which is called the Foundation Program, Chapter 10 of Title 33, is so complicated that, but it's so flexible for school districts to be able to use the money as they see fit for salaries and who's going to get salaries, etc. But I believe the bill is narrowly written, and I've determined in my own mind that when it says specifically and identifiable and certain expenses, that we're talking about funding that comes out of JFAC or out of a formula that specifically says this amount of money goes to this subject, this purpose, and that if it's not used for that purpose, they don't have the flexibility to go use it for some other purpose. And I feel comfortable that the bill is narrow as it is, and maybe as overly simplified as it is a fine budget, or a bill. So thank you. I'm going to be
For the debate on the motion. Hearing none, good lady from 32, for what purpose do you rise?
To debate for the second time, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anybody who wishes to debate for the first time? I think we've about hit everybody. Good lady from 32 can debate for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to offer some reassurance to the body that all agencies are held to the same standard, the same governmental accounting standards. And so rest assured that the language we put in appropriation bills around accountability and conditions, limitations, and restrictions means they are supposed to spend it for the reason that we sent. There is still an ongoing criminal investigation going on right now in one agency when that was found to have not been the case, and we had to report it to the Attorney General's office. State agencies are subject to certain transfer restrictions. When we send money in state agencies, we send it for personnel, for capital, for trustee and benefit, or for capital outlay. State agencies do have flexibility in those expense categories, limited ability to transfer funds between those expense categories. The problem is public schools are not state agencies, but the State Department of Education is a state agency, and that's who we are holding accountable here, is to make sure that when we send the money to the State Department of Education, we actually transfer it into a giant fund called the Public School Income Fund. The State Department then disperses that money out. And so I want to assure you that when we have long-standing audit findings, Division of Occupational Licensing is another example. We have had long-standing material findings. So we finally created policy in the appropriation bill for a couple of years to get them corrected, and then this good gentleman to my right picked that up and put it into a policy bill, so it's a permanent policy about how they use their funding. That's the situation here. If you pull up our transparency website and go to the single-page report on the fiscal year 2024 audit fact sheet, you will see that there are uncorrected findings going back to July 1st of 2020. Those continue right up through 2023. Now, we did give them an auditor last year to help them fix this problem. But right now, these material findings are a reflection of the State Department being unable to verify the accuracy of payments to school districts to the tune of over $3 billion. That needs fixed. Beyond that, some of the money that we do send we call discretionary. That means it has no strings. You can spend it on whatever you need to spend it on. If that's health insurance, if that's more salary money, if that's athletics, if that's full-day kindergarten. Actually, I shouldn't say literacy. You can use the literacy money for that. But districts are using that for full-day kindergarten. They can use discretionary for kindergarten, because they can use it to pay salaries, which is what pays the difference between what the state sends for a half-day and what a district might spend for if they're choosing to offer full day. So this, I applaud the good gentleman. He worked with our auditors actually to get this language, and it is our duty to make sure that the taxpayer funds we're in charge of are spent according to the law, and this is going to help us do that. I would again ask for your green light. Thank you.
For the debate on the motion, good lady from 19 for the second time. Good lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, good speaker. And I just wanted to comment on that because I think what was just brought up helps us answer the question about why teachers didn't get that full salary. It is because the formula, again, a cart before the horse, is such that the state does not, in the case of kindergarten, actually pay for the full salary of a kindergarten teacher. And so when you get that lump sum and you say 6% for, every teacher, but you don't actually pay for all those teachers, then they have to distribute it out. So now if you've got 30 full-day kindergarten teachers that you've got to supplement half of their salaries, that's going to reduce the amount for every other teacher as to their raise. And then we add on other situations like specialists, and that's what happens. Those are the kind of nuances I am talking about here. it is not so cut and dry as to say, well, they didn't use it for this or they moved it around for that. There are reasons. And I heard that there's lots of transparency and there's lots of accountability in the appropriations. So let's make sure that we have all the specifics that we are requiring before we demand that requirement.
For debate on the motion. Gentleman from Levin, for what purpose do you ride?
To debate the bill, Mr. Speaker.
For the second time?
No, first, if I may.
Okay, so we passed that up. So would you like to ask unanimous consent of the body to debate for this first time?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask unanimous consent that I may debate for the first time for this bill.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there objection? Thank you. There's been an objection. For the debate on the motion. Hearing none, would the good gentleman 7 care to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. This bill is how all bills should be. It's simple, it's to the point, and it's effective. We don't need 15-page bills, we don't need 8-page bills, we don't need 4-page bills. We need accountability. This bill simply gets to the accountability. Right now, there is zero accountability. When these schools and these State Department of Education, the State Board of Education, there's audits that exist where they've been out of compliance for over 6 years and nothing's being done to fix it because there is no accountability. For some reason, this bill keeps turning into a teacher pay bill. This is not a teacher pay bill. This is a bill that deals with allocated funds, directly allocated funds. So it's not general funds, it's not discretionary funds, it's allocated funds. So when we allocate funds to technology for computers and we give a school $20,000 and they use 10, they have to give 10 back. It doesn't need a trigger, it doesn't need anything. These schools know when they receive money for a certain purpose, it has to be used for that purpose. It's in their audit, it exists already. When it is a line item allocation, they know that that money is only for that line item. And if they use it for something else, they know they are using it wrong. It is misappropriation of funds. This bill simply gives JFAC the teeth to take the money back if they don't give it back to us willingly. This is as easy as it gets. I'm asking for your green light. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Debate is closed. Question is House Bill 416 pass the House. Clerk will lock machine. Members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Does any member change their vote? Clerk will lock machine and report the pairs.
Thompson votes aye. Galaviz votes nay.
52 ayes, 17 nay, 1 absent, excused. Already having voted in favor of House Bill 416. House Bill 416 is passed House. Correction title.
No correction to title.
Title approved.